Hello, welcome back to the Leukopak Lady. Today I'm talking about cell isolation from leukopaks, and I'm going to walk through why some developers want this done at the site of collection and why others absolutely do not, and where I think a good middle ground should be. And honestly, I'm of two minds about this. I can see both sides and I can understand why each approach might be the right one. So as you heard me discuss, I strongly believe that GMP compliance for allogeneic cell therapies begins with the donor. However, many developers consider cell isolation to be the true start of therapy manufacturing. So for this discussion today, let's agree that this is the first step in the manufacturing of allogeneic CAR-based therapies. So typically starting material, like a leukopak, is collected and minimally processed before shipment to the cell therapy developer's laboratory or manufacturing facility. Minimal processing may include cryopreservation and testing, or it may only involve packing and shipping. Some developers are interested in having the collection facility perform the cell isolation process and provide them only with purified T cells, NK cells, monocytes, or stem cells. There are several reasons why I'm in favor of cell isolation at the site of collection. First, this allows the collection centers to be more actively involved in the success of the therapies that they're collecting starting material for, and eases the burdens on the CDMO at the same time. In addition, it allows for better stewardship of the collected material. A single product can be fractionated into T cells, NK cells, monocytes, and stem cells if the donor was mobilized, creating multiple whole cellular products from a single collection and allowing multiple developers of different therapy types to use cells from the same super donors. If you caught my interview recently with Lee Buckler at BCA, he discussed this as the future of starting materials, and he pointed out that this is exactly what the blood industry does with whole blood. So if cell isolation takes place before distribution, no cells would go to waste. And this reminds me of a story. Two women were arguing over the last orange in a grocery store. They finally agreed to just split the orange in half and go on their separate ways. The first woman discards the peel and eats the fruit, while the second woman uses the peel as zest in a cake recipe and discards the fruit. With better communication and planning, they both could have had 100% of what they needed, but instead half the orange was wasted. Another reason I think this would be a good approach is because it would allow for the cryopreservation process to be optimized for specific cell types rather than a mixed bag of cells. For example, NK cells require different freeze curves and cryoprotectant concentrations than T cells, so isolation at the collection site would allow for a new level of innovation. So what would this mean for collection centers to be able to perform this process? More collection centers would need to develop their laboratories. This includes bringing on expensive equipment, staff expertise, and regulatory infrastructure. Standardization of isolation protocols would also need to exist, so a developer could source their starting cell population from multiple suppliers. And then this leads me to the other side of the argument, why I think it's better for cell therapy developers to keep this in-house, or at least at their CDMOs. First, it's proven difficult, if not nearly impossible, to standardize the collection and cryopreservation processes. So I think the same problems would arise if cell isolation was performed at collection centers. And I recently talked about how the industry has begun to move towards cryopreservation hubs as a solution to the problem of variability and lack of standardization across different collection centers, rather than waiting around for collection centers to work together. So performing cell isolation on a large scale also takes significant training and expertise. And the question is, can individual collection centers secure the talent, workforce, and regulatory infrastructure needed to perform this step well? I'm skeptical, and so are cell therapy developers. In addition, the burden of oversight for the developers on their collection centers would be significant. Much more difficult than oversight currently of donor recruitment and product collection. But this level of oversight already exists with the CDMO. So here's where I actually land: a middle ground solution, regional hubs for cell isolation, like those popping up for cryopreservation. This would allow for the concentration of talent, workforce, and expensive equipment, as well as create better stewardship of the collected products, so different cell types from the same donor and the same collection can be used for different therapies. So if you're thinking about establishing or growing hubs for cell isolation and cryopreservation, this is exactly the kind of work that I can do. I would love to help. And come back for the next episode of the Leukopak Lady. It's the season 2 finale and I explore where CSM is headed in 2026. See you then.